Senator Nenadi Usman, a former minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, emphasized the significant positive impact of the African Continental Free Trade Area on Africa's economy. She highlighted that the African Continental Free Trade Area can boost economic growth, create job opportunities, and enhance the continent's global competitiveness. Here's a video as she shares more lights. In an interview with Cameroon Radio Television's Globewatch,
there is an estimate which suggests that within a decade, that is 10 years, the African Continental Free Trade Area would take nearly 100 million Africans living in the continent out of poverty. As a former finance minister dealing with money on a daily basis, what does that entail to the ordinary man?
Let me start by saying that the African continent, as it is, has a population of about 1.5 billion people.
Okay.
And majority of this 1.5 billion people are young people, which means that Africa has a youthful, predominantly youthful population. And when you say they are youthful, it means that they are strong, active, and potentially they are a huge workforce. When you have a huge workforce, it means you have a huge pool of consumers. Lots of consumption leads to lots of taxes. A lot of taxes leads to lots of revenue for the government. When government has revenue, then it can use that to not just pay wages, but also provide basic amenities for the people. And as they pay wages, the people then use it again for consumption. So it's like a circle. It's a circle that goes round and round and round and round. So sincerely, I think with the population we have and the right policies like the African Continental Free Trade Area, if well implemented, we stand a lot to gain as Africans. First, if you remember, the World Bank carried out a study and came out with a report. So I would want to quote their figures, not my figures, as to what Africans stand to gain if we implement the African Continental Free Trade Area properly. If properly implemented. The World Bank in 2022 said that if properly implemented, we'll have 30 million Africans lifted out of poverty. And it will boost the incomes of 68 million Africans who currently, as of today, live on less than $6 a day. The report also says that if properly implemented, the free trade agreement would boost Africa's income by $450 billion by the year 2035. And this is an increase of about 7% as at today's, what the numbers been bandied around as at today. And it will also add $76 billion to the income of the rest of the world, because it's not just Africa that is going to benefit. The rest of the world will benefit as well.
A portion of the statistics you just quoted from the African or the World Bank equally says that by 2050, roughly $29 trillion will be added to the African economy.
That is true.
My simple question today is, who should be smiling when you talk all those figures?
Everybody should be smiling.
The policymakers or the ordinary man?
The government, both.
Okay.
Both. Governments will smile because, as I said earlier, the population is hugely, mainly youthful, which means a big consumption bucket because they are a potential workforce. And once this is implemented well and people get to have jobs, they are going to pay taxes. And when they pay taxes, who do we pay taxes to? It's to the government. So the government is going to make money. The government stands to gain. Also, investors, when there is a big market, it means Africa will now become a big market. Once there is a big market, investors would certainly want to come and invest.
Investors probably will come, and there is no debate about that, because the whole idea of the African Continental Free Trade Area is to increase the volume of intra-African trade,
Yes.
which is the lowest by regional block trading compared to others. 18% intra-African trade. But when you take the Asian bloc, it's about 90%. When you take the North American bloc, it's about 98%. When you take the European Union space, it's roughly the same figures. But why were the big economies on the continent, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Angola, South Africa, reticent at the onset to ratify this, when they knew that their people were going to benefit?
Well, what I would want to say at this point is this 18% you are talking about. Let's just talk among ourselves now.
Yeah.
It is quoted as 18% because most of the trade that goes on among us is undocumented, it's informal, it's done below the radar.
Yeah.
Which means the various countries' bureaus of national statistics don't capture those numbers.
Okay.
And once these numbers are not captured, it's not reflected in what numbers the government uses.
And how do we solve that problem?
We solve that problem by having things like pre-shipment inspection programs put in place.
Okay.
Which means every product that leaves, let's say, Cameroon to Nigeria, or leaves Nigeria to Cameroon, exporters are encouraged to come and register the products with the pre-shipment inspection agent so that the quality, the quantity, the value, the source, and where it's heading to is captured.
Okay.
And the Bureau of Statistics will definitely need those figures to be able to say whether you are a net importer or you are a net exporter.
The policymakers or those who drafted the African Continental Free Trade Area when it was signed in 2018 or 17 like that in the Rwandan capital Kigali,
Yes.
basically excluded the tax regime from the entire tariff system. Just the custom duties are involved. And like I said at the beginning, we are already at the pilot phase. Cameroon, Tunisia, and Ghana, other countries who are involved in this initial stage. As a former finance minister, somebody, as a legislator too, because you sat in the Nigerian Senate for some time, what inspired such a framing of a document that we are not going to involve taxes, but just the custom duties?
Okay, first, you had asked me a question earlier that some of the big countries were foot dragging when it came to accepting the African Continental Free Trade Area, the concept. I think they weren't looking at the big picture. They most probably were looking at just the picture of how do we protect our industries, because they believe that their industries were bigger and better developed than the smaller economies within Africa. But you also must look at, political issues come in. Whenever a president wants to contest election, people come from the private sector to put money together for campaigns.
Sure.
So when it's time to take certain decisions, those people believe they must have a say in what happens.
Okay.
But that is not the issue. The issue is when we look at the economies of scale, what we stand to gain by having a bigger market, then I think these big countries need to...
The multiplier effect.
I think the big countries need to support this program. Now, back to what you were saying. You were saying that taxes were not taken into consideration, that only the customs duty. People mistaken when they think the customs is all about revenue collection, that is custom duties, excise duties. That is not it. The main focus, the main aim, or the main duty of the customs in any country you go to is trade facilitation.
Okay.
And the African Continental Free Trade Area is all about trading.
Okay.
So capturing the customs goes a long way in ensuring that this scheme is a success. You said in your opening remarks that most African countries became independent and now sovereign nations. Every sovereign nation you see has its own peculiar way of taxation. So if you want to capture that right now, ab initio, to say that tax has to be involved is going to be very, very complicated.
Okay.
Because you cannot come to me as a foreign nation, for example, and say, dump your taxation system and pick mine. No. Neither would you. To harmonize with how many countries are in the AU? About 55. And so far, 54 out of them are for the African Continental Free Trade Area. So by the time you want to harmonize 54 tax
regimes,
it will take you a long time. But I'm not saying it's not doable.
Okay.
It is doable. But I think the way forward for the African Continental Free Trade Area as is now is correct. That is by facing it, picking things in phases. Okay. The first, you start with the customs, which is the trade facilitation, and you harmonize all that. Then at some point, you will be able to take in the taxes as well.